That was the first time I've ever called her during a campus tour stop.
And so Mikey called me, and I'll never forget him just being like, "Charlie's been shot."
The world was perfectly, deceptively normal, and then, in the space of a single conversation, it shattered.
I just collapsed in the middle of the parking lot. Called her.
For Erika Kirk, the memory of the period when her husband, Charlie Kirk, was subjected to a violent attack is not a single, monolithic moment, but a complex tapestry of trauma, grief, and slow-dawning clarity.
But I'm so glad he didn't suffer.
Details of which have been carefully revisited to set the record straight. In a latest, deeply personal and revealing interview, she sat down to unpack the devastating sequence of events and her ongoing journey of navigating life after an unthinkable act. She has clarified a crucial point of the narrative. She was not in a doctor's office with her mother when the ultimate news came. That was a different day, a different context. The reality, as she has now detailed, is a testament to how profound shock can reshape memory and how the process of healing involves returning to those moments to understand them with new eyes. This is not just a story about a single, tragic incident, but about the long, arduous road that follows, a road paved with visceral shock, a fierce, protective love, and a resilience that consciously chooses light over overwhelming darkness. The setting, as Erika has explained, was one of those mundane moments that later become etched in memory with impossible clarity. She was with her mother, engaged in the ordinary rhythm of a daily errand. Her phone was with her, a constant tether to a very public life, but her attention was momentarily diverted from its digital hum. For a fleeting second, her mind might have been on a happier moment, a memory of a live-streamed video of Charlie, perhaps from earlier that day or another day, beaming with his characteristic energy and connecting with a crowd. It was a snapshot of the life they had built together, a life of public engagement and shared purpose. This simple, mundane moment of normalcy was the final, quiet action of her old life. The next time the world truly snapped into focus, her reality had been irrevocably broken, the familiar contours of her existence rendered unrecognizable. The intrusion, as she clarified in this latest conversation, did not come from Mickey McCoy on the day of the incident itself. This is a crucial detail that her recent interview has brought to light, correcting the long-held assumption about how the news traveled. The initial, life-altering words were delivered by another voice, a fact that underscores the chaotic fog of those first hours. However, Mickey McCoy, in his capacity as Chief of Staff, immediately became a central, stabilizing figure in the chaotic aftermath, his role evolving from a senior operational leader to a vital coordinator of the response, managing the flood of information and the urgent need for security and logistics. The initial news of the situation came as a profound shock to the entire organization, and the operational response was immediate and all-consuming. The rhythm of their work and life, once predictable and structured, was now a discordant, frantic scramble. A cold knot of dread, the first physical manifestation of a fear she could not yet even name, began to form in her stomach. The routine of her day, of her life, had been violently and irreparably breached. The words that finally came through from that first, fateful caller were blunt, brutal, and permanently life-altering. They were a variation of the phrase that would come to define her new existence, the news that Charlie had been shot, followed by urgent instructions to get the children and activate security protocols. Each syllable landed not as a word, but as a physical hammer blow. The term itself, so often heard in distant news reports, now carried a visceral, personal weight that seemed to crush the air from her lungs. It was no longer an abstract concept. It was a stark, terrifying statement of fact about her husband, the father of her children, the man she loved. The subsequent instruction to immediately secure her family transformed the personal tragedy into a sprawling, multi-front crisis. This was not just a medical emergency, it was an event that demanded immediate, primal action, catapulting her from a state of calm into a vortex of survival instincts. The foundation of her life, which moments before had felt so solid and predictable, had instantly turned to quicksand, and she was sinking fast. What followed was a physical reaction so pure and elemental that it completely bypassed all conscious thought. The devastating news seemed to detonate directly within her body, triggering a cascade of physiological responses before her mind could even begin to process what she had heard. There was no pause for rational processing, no moment of stunned silence where the information could be logically filed away. A powerful surge of adrenaline, cold and electrifying, shot through her veins, priming her muscles for immediate action. She was on her feet and moving almost instantly, but the word moving is entirely too tame and orderly to describe what happened next. It was a sprint, a frantic, desperate flight from the location where she had received the news, past bewildered faces that blurred into an indistinguishable crowd, her sole objective now to follow the directive that had been delivered to her with such urgency. She burst out into the open air, but the outside world offered no solace, no escape from the reality that was now chasing her. And there, under the vast and indifferent sky, the strength that had momentarily propelled her outward evaporated completely, and her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed onto the hard, unyielding ground. This was the moment, as she would later describe it, when the unbelievable nightmare truly began. It was a nightmare from which there would be no waking, a new and terrible reality born right there on the pavement, a reality defined by disorienting terror and profound loss. The frantic journey that followed, the desperate, fumbled calls to security details, the frantic race to gather her terrified children, the blur of streets and anonymous faces, all of it felt like moving through a tunnel of pure, undiluted panic. Every second stretched into a torturous eternity, every red light felt like a personal, agonizing torment designed to keep her from where she needed to be. The human mind, in such extreme moments, struggles desperately to find purchase, to latch onto anything that can make sense of the senseless. It flits wildly between a desperate, irrational hope, a misunderstanding, a minor wound, a terrible mistake in communication, and the chilling, bottomless abyss of the truth that the tone of the caller's voice had already confirmed. Arriving at the hospital was like being transported into another, alien world, a world of hushed, solemn tones, grim-faced professionals, and the oppressive, sterile smell of antiseptic that hangs heavy in the air. It was a place of waiting, but not the hopeful, anticipatory waiting of a birth. This was the dreadful, passive waiting for a verdict that had, in truth, already been decided long before she arrived. Law enforcement officials and medical personnel, their professional demeanors a necessary shield against the raw, human emotion they were forced to confront daily, formed a somber, impenetrable perimeter around the harsh, final truth. They spoke to her with a practiced, gentle caution, suggesting that it might be better, less traumatic, to wait, to allow the mortuary to handle the next, most difficult steps. They were trying, in their own way, to protect her, to spare her the final, graphic confirmation of her loss, to be a buffer between her and the ultimate, crushing reality. But Erika Kirk was done being a passive recipient of tragedy. The initial, paralyzing shock was now beginning to crystallize into something else, a fierce, protective, and unwavering resolve. She had been told what had happened. Now she felt a primal need to see it for herself. She needed to bear witness. To the well-intentioned advice to wait, to shield herself, she offered a firm, calm, and unwavering refusal. She insisted on seeing her husband. Her reasons were simple, profound, and rooted in the deep, intimate truth of their relationship. She needed to see what had been done to him, to confront the full reality of the violence that had taken him, to sear that image into her memory so that the abstract, clinical word could never again adequately define what had been stolen from them. And more than that, there was a deeply personal, emotional debt that she felt compelled to pay. She had missed giving him a kiss that morning, a small, routine gesture of love and connection that now loomed in her mind as a monumental, aching regret. In that cold, clinical, and impersonal place, she needed to deliver that final kiss. It was an act of reclamation, a powerful, silent statement that despite the violence, the hatred, and the chaos, he was still hers, and her love would be the final, enduring truth he would carry with him from this world. What she found when she was finally allowed into that room to see him was, paradoxically, not the horrifying scene she had braced herself for during the frantic, nightmare-filled car ride. The image she had conjured in her mind, one of trauma and disfigurement, was replaced by a different, far more peaceful reality. Charlie looked, as she vividly recalled, as if he were merely sleeping. He was still warm. And on his face was an expression she knew intimately, one that she had seen 1,000 times before, a slight smirk. A hint of a smile that suggested a private joke, a quiet, unshakable confidence, a profound peace that seemed to utterly defy the brutal manner of his passing. In that single, transformative moment, the narrative of a brutal, senseless act of violence was, for her, powerfully reframed. She saw not a victim, but a man who had died exactly as he had lived, fully committed, without fear, and entirely on his own terms. That gentle smirk became a powerful, sustaining symbol for her. It was, to her, a clear sign that he was already at peace, that he had, in her words, blinked and he was with the Lord. It was a silent, defiant message to those who had committed this act, a testament that while they could stop his heart, they could never kill his vision, his spirit, or the movement he had helped to build. His physical body was present, but the essence of him, the thing that truly mattered, was already far beyond anyone's reach. This moment of painful, heartbreaking clarity provided a strange, sustaining comfort, a core memory of peace around which the subsequent, raging storm of her grief could swirl. In the weeks and months that followed the initial tragedy, a new and different kind of pain began to emerge, the profound horror of the public spectacle. Video footage of the incident, captured on multiple phones from multiple angles, began to circulate relentlessly across the internet. It became a piece of digital content, a clickable link, a subject for cold, clinical analysis and heated, often cruel, online debate. For Erika, this widespread dissemination felt like a secondary violation, a continual, vicious reopening of a wound that was struggling to heal. The very idea that strangers, or worse, individuals filled with malice, could watch the most traumatic, private moment of her life, the moment her children effectively lost their father, as a form of casual entertainment or for political point scoring, was a burden almost too heavy to bear. She has since made a heartfelt, public plea for basic human perspective, asking people to simply imagine if it was their own spouse, their own parent, their own child, whose final, violent seconds were playing on a continuous, unending loop for the entire world to see. She urges people, with a compelling and empathetic intensity, not to waste their own precious, fleeting lives by consciously consuming such a painful and traumatic event, to try and understand that behind the cold, impersonal pixels on a screen is a real, grieving family, a pain that is all-consuming, and a loss that never, ever fully subsides. It is a plea for a return to basic human decency in a digital age that often appears to have forgotten its meaning. To protect her own sanity, her own ability to function, and her capacity to be fully present for her grieving children and the large organization Charlie left behind, Erika has made a conscious, deliberate, and disciplined choice to insulate herself from the granular details of the ongoing investigation. She has chosen not to read the full, graphic autopsy report. She actively avoids seeking out the minute, forensic details of the individual's motives or the precise, clinical trajectory of the events. This is not an act of denial or willful ignorance, but rather one of profound, necessary self-preservation. She understands, on a very deep level, that some forms of knowledge, once acquired, can never be forgotten or unseen, and that such harrowing details would only serve to feed the trauma, to make the lingering nightmare more vivid, more detailed, and more inescapable. She has stated that she must actively guard her heart, to have the emotional strength and capacity to do the immense work that still remains for her to do. This cultivated inner strength is also the direct source of her remarkable, almost preternatural outlook on her own personal safety. When asked if she lives in a state of fear for her own life, her response is strikingly devoid of the anxiety one might expect. "What are they going to threaten me with?" she has asked, with a tone of serene defiance. "Going to heaven sooner to be with my husband?" It is a perspective that has been forged in the very hottest fire of personal loss, a place where earthly threats and intimidations lose their power when held against the promise of a celestial reunion that her faith assures her is both ultimate and joyful. This is not a death wish. It is a profound liberation from the tyranny of fear, a powerful declaration that love and faith are infinitely more potent and enduring forces than hatred or violence could ever hope to be. The grief, however, remains a constant, physical presence in her life, a shadow that steadily lengthens and deepens as the day wanes into night. She has openly identified the nighttime hours as the most difficult, the most challenging part of her ongoing journey. It is in the deep, quiet, and isolating hours of the night that the physical absence of her husband becomes most acutely, painfully palpable. The empty space beside her in the bed, the profound silence where his voice, his laughter, his breathing should be, the countless small routines of a shared life now performed alone. This is the daily, grinding, inescapable reality of her loss. The silence itself is not merely an absence of sound. It is an active, heavy presence, a constant reminder of what is gone, what has been taken. Yet, even here, in her darkest moments, she has managed to find anchors, to find sources of strength and solace. She feels no anger toward God, a sentiment that speaks to a deep and resilient faith that has been tested in the most extreme way imaginable and has not been found wanting. And she carries with her the immense, incalculable comfort of having absolutely no regrets about her relationship with Charlie. There were no unresolved arguments left hanging in the air, no words of love or appreciation left unspoken, no affection left unexpressed. Theirs was a marriage lived fully, passionately, and without reservation, and that sense of completeness of a story fully told becomes a healing balm, a crucial tool that helps her process the pain from a place of love, rather than be consumed by it from a place of bitterness. It is the critical difference between a clean, albeit profound, wound, and a festering one. Both are exceptionally painful, but one has a far greater, inherent capacity to heal over time. Erika Kirk's story, as detailed in her latest powerful and corrective interview, is ultimately not one of a tragedy narrowly defined by a single, violent act, but a much broader, more universal narrative about love, faith, resilience, and the defiant, daily choice to find meaning and purpose even when the world has gone dark. It is a profound testament to the human spirit's immense capacity to endure, to witness, and to ultimately transcend. It is about correcting the record not for the sake of pedantry, but for the sake of personal truth and authenticity in her own healing journey. It is about the clarity and strength that can come from revisiting our very darkest moments with a resilience we didn't know we possessed when we were initially living through them. Her narrative is a raw, unfiltered, and deeply moving look into the heart of a woman who has stared directly into the abyss and made the conscious, courageous choice to build a garden at its very edge. We would be very interested to hear your own thoughts and reflections on this powerful story in the comments section below. If you found this account compelling and wish to follow more in-depth conversations and reports, please subscribe to the channel for future updates.